Hi, class. There's a very popular and pretty good movie that's based on this novel by Victor Hugo, and it's called Les Miserables. And it means the miserable in French. It's kind of obvious, but I want to give a little bit of context because in that book, that play, the movie, there is an attempted revolution. And sometimes people try to associate it with the French Revolution. And we're going to talk about it today. So even though it doesn't necessarily depict the French Revolution that we've been studying from 1789, it's still it shows some revolutionary ideals. It shows a little bit of what it was like in France around this period of time, and so I would like for us to be able to watch that film in class together. And before we do that, I wanted to give some context to it. So that's why I wanted to make this ed puzzle. So again, this movie is not depicting the French Revolution that people talk about when they talk about the French Revolution. So I'm going to give a little bit of scaffold of French history in the late 1700s and all the way through the mid 1800s to give a little bit of context on the matter. So let's start with first. Here is the book, what it looks like, a lot of the artwork that goes along with this novel, Les Miserables. And again, the author of this book was Victor Hugo, right? And so in 1789, that's when you have the French Revolution, the one we've been studying about. The first French Revolution, we could say, or the French Revolution, which is the French Revolution that people talk about when they're talking about the French Revolution. It was all about deposing Louis XVI and his wife, Marie Antoinette. And you can see in this picture here in the bottom right, this is her body there. I think she just got guillotined. This is her head on the pike right here. Yeah. And it was a very bloody revolution. And in the top picture, that's the storming of the Bastille right over there. And that starts the beginning of the first republic in France, the first republic, remember? So there were all these dreams and aspirations that France would now be a country of the people, not too dissimilar to the United States. But revolutions are not so easy or so clean or so fast. And France had to go through a long period of pain before it could really establish itself as a real republic. Obviously, we know we've been studying this unit, we talked about the Reign of Terror. So let's keep going on further off in history, right? So let's fast forward. Let's fast forward to 1799. This is when Napoleon Bonaparte comes to power. So when people talk about Napoleon, they are talking about Napoleon Bonaparte. We'll see that there are other Napoleons, but if people just say, hey, Napoleon did this or that, they're talking about Napoleon Bonaparte, this Napoleon. So Napoleon comes to power and he officially ends the First Republic in 1804 because he declares himself to be the Emperor of the French. But let's fast forward. Right? Let's go a little bit further, right? And we've gotten to this point in our unit. So we've talked about the French Revolutionary Wars, the Napoleonic Wars, the French Revolution. And so in 1815, you get to 1815, this is about 10 years, actually 15 years, right, after, obviously, 1799. So that would put us at 1815. 1815, essentially, Napoleon faces his Waterloo, which was literally at Waterloo in Belgium. That's why people talk about facing your Waterloo. It means facing your defeat, your end, right? So he was banished after his final defeat at Waterloo by the British, and he was banished for a little bit to Elba. He was able to come back. He had 100, technically it's actually 111 days in power, but we call it Napoleon's 100 days. But then he was finally defeated. And then he was finally put into exile in St. Helena, where he died. And in 1815, you essentially have the restoration of the Bourbon monarchy. And when I say the Bourbon monarchy, I mean the royal family that Louis XVI belonged to. So what happened was Louis XVI's younger brother comes to power. and they call him Louis the 18th. So this picture on the right is Louis the 18th, and this raises a very good question. What happened to Louis the 17th? And remember, Louis the 17th was Louis the 16th's son, who, remember, he died in prison at the age of 10 in 1795 during the French Revolution, during the Revolutionary period. So Napoleon ends, right? Napoleon's reign ends here in 1815, right? At the Battle of Waterloo. And you had the formal restoration of the Bourbon monarchy. So France had a monarchy once again. So you have the restoration. This is Louis the 18th. And then in 1824, Louis the 18th dies. And he dies childless. He doesn't have any children. It's about, 9 years? So he dies childless. And so his younger brother, Charles X, comes to power. So then you have Charles X. And Charles X, this is Charles X right here on the right. And so let's go a little bit further off into history. You fast forward all the way to 1830. A lot of discontent, right? A lot of people are upset. And now you have the Second French Revolution. You might say, oh, hey, this must be what Les Miserables is all about. No, we're not there just yet. Les Mis is not about the Second French Revolution. Sometimes this revolution is called the July Revolution. And this revolution actually did not, it was successful, but it did not establish a republic at this point. It instead installed, and this whole time there was a liberalization, the monarchy. So the monarchy, even when it was put in power, had a gradual decline in how much power it had. But after the July Revolution, they put in Charles X's cousin. And Charles X's cousin, right, who was the Duke of Orleans, who was this guy right here, the Duke of Orleans. His name's Louis Philippe I. So this is Louis Philippe I on the right. And so you're saying, you started off talking this video about Les Mis. You haven't really mentioned Les Mis yet. So I understand you probably want a little bit of context. So now I'll give you the context. So if you watch the movie, it starts off with a man named Jean Valjean, and he's at a shipping place where they're repairing ships of some sort. That was 1815, after Waterloo. So it was under Louis XVIII's regime. And that's really the start of the movie, is right about there. And then the real climax of the movie, which is this rebellion. There's these barricades being set up in Paris. You have all these young, idealistic folks who are trying to overthrow the government. This does not happen until 1832. This is 1832, right? And what catalyzed that, what started that, there were several things that was catalyzing it. And actually, most revolutions are caused by just economic discontent. If people are rich and happy and have jobs and aren't getting sick, most people aren't really going to be in the mood to revolt and rebel. But in 1832, as you can imagine, the economic situation was not good. There was a very nasty outbreak of cholera. So there was disease spreading. The economic situation was bad. And what really catalyzed the events in Les Mis, and they will refer to it in the movie, is the death of this guy right over here named Jean-Maximilien Lamarck. Very hard to pronounce if you don't speak French. So he dies in June of 1832, and he was very sympathetic to the plight of the poor, to the plight of the common man. And the average folks said, hey, look, he's our guy in government. And this guy, he had an influential role in government. And when he died, they were like, look, we don't have anybody else in a high position who can speak for us and to advocate for us. So let's use his funeral as a catalyst for revolt, for rebellion. And you saw that happening. You will see that happening in the movie Les Miserables. So Les Mis, that climactic moment that you're going to see, that is going to be the June Rebellion of 1832. And it's not, you don't have to have amazing comprehension of watching movies when you see it to realize that this was unsuccessful. So this right here didn't work. And if it did work, it might have been called the Third French Revolution, but it was not. It was an unsuccessful revolution or unsuccessful rebellion, really. And it was that Victor Hugo observed it. The writer of Les Mis observed it for himself, and that's why he's able to recount it in so much detail. And that's how we got this movie and the play and the book. He was able to see the barricading, the young people, the shooting in the streets, all the rest. So, this is really a bit of a review. When people talk about the French Revolution, they're usually talking about, the French Revolution of 1789 begins to establish the First Republic. It was a successful revolution. You have the Second French Revolution. This is the July Revolution. This is in 1830. And this puts into power Louis-Philippe I, the person that they're trying to overthrow in Les Mis. And they don't establish the Second Republic after this. For the Second Republic, we're going to have to go all the way to 1848, right? So that's about 18 years to 1848, where you have the Third French Revolution, which leads to the popular election, right? He was elected, of Napoleon Bonaparte's nephew, his nephew, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. This guy right here on the right. But, France still isn't done. It still can't establish itself as a long-lasting republic. In 1851, this guy declares himself emperor. So 1851, he too declares himself emperor, and France is not finally freed of kings and emperors completely until 1870. So, let's do this run all the way to 1870, where France essentially loses the Franco-Prussian War, and this guy right here on the right is deposed, and you have the establishment of the Third French Republic. So clearly, France has had many revolutions over its history, and it wasn't until 1870 that the final French king/emperor monarch was finally deposed. But we're going to be watching this movie, Les Mis. It's going to be kind of give you that feeling of what it might have been like to witness and to have been a part of and seen one of these French revolutions, right? So hopefully you guys will enjoy it, and let me know if you have any questions about it.